Welcome back, everyone, to another week at Energy Bytes here. Rad Dad in the house, John Calfan. Bobby's daughter went home sick today, so Bobby is out today. But today, I'm super excited to be here with Hatem, Dr. Nasr from Softserve. Appreciate you coming.
Pleasure.
I'm
super excited to be with the Wildcatters.
Same, man. We're happy to have you.
Yes.
We've kind of, I tried to minimize the conversation before because that's always the good, juicy stuff. But, tell people a little bit about what you're currently doing, what at Softserve, and kind of get into some of that. And then like I said, we'll work backwards from there. You've got a really fun, cool kind of resume, and you've done a bunch of different stuff all over the world. So I'm very
sure. I have been, my career with Softserve is relatively young. A little bit over 2 years, and it is, and I'll tell you, very quickly why I joined Softserve, because I've been working in the oil and gas. I spent the last 15 years dedicated my career pretty much to one subject, which is digital oil field. I mean, that has consumed me. And one area that I have always had a tremendous amount of passion is how to build intelligent systems, right? I mean, so when COVID came, I was doing a lot of work in the Middle East, working with all the big operators, the big IOCs there. I spent probably 15 years in the Middle East. And then I stopped traveling there because of COVID. So then I had several opportunities, and I wanted to join a company that has leadership in data science and AI. And so this is why I joined. And this is exactly what I've been doing. So I've been focusing a great deal. And it's not about, I'm not about the trend. And I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about generative AI. So that has been a huge focus for me this year. And there are a lot of reasons why I have great belief in the technology. There is a great promise, and I can share with you all my reasoning and my rationale. But that's what we work on. And the company, we work across multiple verticals.
Right.
So energy is one of them, right? Oil and gas is one of them. We have a big, a group working on manufacturing, on healthcare, on all sorts of areas. We have few areas we focus on. We don't do everything. We work on subsurface, smart, using AI to do subsurface data, processing, seismic data specifically. We work with a lot of big clients. We work a lot on intelligent production management, like production optimization.
SCADA.
Well, more on the software side, how you can do production optimization using AI, specifically for artificially lifted systems, electrical submersible pump, gas lift, those kinds of things. I've been focusing a great deal since last year on the area of methane data management, since this is a huge issue for us in the industry. We work a lot on worker safety, and on the generative AI is applications across multiple areas.
Right.
Whether it's subsurface, surface data processing, even including using Gen AI to analyze images, videos, those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I'm super bullish on Gen AI for a lot of stuff. It took me just thinking through a lot of this stuff. I feel like Gen AI, people think it's new and it's very interesting, but I am coming to the conclusion, personally at least, that it's almost it's a derivative, because it had to happen because we have so much data. Humans, we have so much data, we can't do it. We've been using ML for that on the numerical side for for a while now. And so now in order to process all this text data that we now have, this is the next iteration. This is kind of the next step that something had to come, because the volume of data that we have now is just insurmountable, basically, for most humans.
It's insurmountable. And if you've been, I have been in this business for a long time, just to give you an idea, I myself have been involved in 3 major initiatives in knowledge management for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
The work on knowledge management in our industry started in the 90s. BP, Shell, Schlumberger, Halliburton, they had major initiatives. And the idea was to capture knowledge, but the technology then was very primitive. It was all about indexing, stuff, and so it was very disappointing. Actually, I did work on some projects in the late '90s. I worked on a project in 2005. I was involved with a project with Shell, and I did a project when I was in the Middle East, also around 2014, 2015. And frankly, all of them sort of, I hate to say it, but but they ended up in sort of going nowhere. So now generative AI is giving us this incredible opportunity to do this thing right.
Right.
The other thing that I worry about, and I read so much about statistics in our business. I'm a student of history. If you look at the last 10 to 12 years, right? It started actually, if you go back to 2014, 2015, the number of graduates in petroleum engineering in the last 10 years alone has gone down by 70%. That's 70. All right?
Yeah, no, I believe it.
The enrollment in petroleum engineering, this is in the United States, has gone down by 76, 77%. It's startling. We have a crisis that a lot of people don't realize. It's a knowledge drain crisis. And one thing that you said is absolutely spot on, the amount of data. We are very unique and as an industry, we don't throw away anything.
Engineers don't like to throw stuff away.
No, it's not only that, it's mandated. If I drill a well today,
right,
2024, and I get some cores from that well, I have to keep those cores forever.
Right.
The logs have to be kept forever.
Right.
The drilling data. So what are we doing with all of this?
Yeah.
So there's immense amount of information that we're not leveraging. I usually, I write an annual report that is usually published in January of every year, our annual sort of State of the Union. And it usually takes me a while because it takes a lot of work, usually about 25, 30 pages long. And I get a lot of help. Our editorial staff and Mark, they fix it up, make it look beautiful. So I'm picking the title. I started working on it last week, and it's going to be, can Gen AI raise the IQ of the oil and gas industry?
Yeah,
and the answer is definitely yes.
That's awesome. No, that is exactly, that's why we started Digital Walk. One of the reasons we started Digital Walk Cutters is because this whole great crew change thing is a very real thing, right? And so it's like, how do we capture this knowledge transfer from everyone that's retiring, leaving the industry? Because like you just mentioned, the stats are shocking. And, there was already, that's the weird thing is it's almost like it's happening again, essentially what happened between the 80s and the 2000s, where there was basically next to no petroleum engineers because the market was so bad and everything, peak oil, et cetera. And then you had a 20-year gap. Then my generation came in the early 2000s, and there was nobody really between them. And now you're kind of seeing it almost play out again with this next generation where it's like, 77%. That's crazy.
We forget the amount of the number of people that we have laid off. In 2014, 2015 bloodbath that happened in our industry, we lost hundreds of thousands of people. Then COVID came, right? And then we just looking at 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm not going back. When I work at Baker Hughes, I was in charge of advanced drilling technology. I had a big team there in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we had a crisis. Oil went sharply down, and I laid off almost half of my team. So we're constantly. And so how do we compensate for that?
Right.
I'm not saying that generative AI is the universal panacea, but it is a tremendous tool. And I hope that our industry is patient enough.
Yeah.
Because we're not patient, right? We're not patient, and we're risk averse, right?
Very.
That we are patient enough to cultivate and invest in this technology, because we're not going to see the results in 6 months or 1 year.
Yeah.
This is going to be further down the line.
Yeah, no, I think that's almost one of the traps that our industry absolutely falls into. It's like we're one of the first people to look, and half the time it seemingly invent the technology a lot of times, right? But then it takes another decade almost for people to start actually adopting it. But I think some of that is due to, just that technology hype cycle curve where it's like you have all these promises and then you go through the trough of despair and then you come back somewhere in between the two is the reality of the situation. And I feel like that's I mean, you saw we've seen what happened with like the ML stuff 5-10 years ago, right? Where it initially came out, everyone was hyping it. And then everyone's like, well, is it really good? And then of course they're like, oh, well, we need really good clean data to do this. And we don't have that. We have data, but it's not structured or, worth a shit. So then they spend 2 years.
I tell people a story about speaking, you're right on, about the story of the lag between the time technology is developed and the time you see. I tell the story of George Mitchell.
Yeah.
In the 80s, when he was investing hundreds of millions of dollars out of his own pocket.
Right.
This man, I love him. He's a visionary in, fracturing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In shale, right? In hydraulic fracturing. And people told him, you're an idiot, you're a moron. And then when we start to really, discover all of this in the 2000s. So this is a long-term game. And I believe, and the reason I was telling you about this IQ, title, it has a meaning because as an industry, we have to raise our intelligence level. People don't realize that if you don't do that, if you don't move very aggressively into these technologies, the chance of being irrelevant is very high. And we saw that in our industry. Now we are becoming more relevant because our industry is making money and we know how to, not to spend it, unwisely and all of this stuff. But then when I look at OpenAI, right? Speaking of a recent story that you want to talk about, OpenAI doing, raising funds, right? They raised about $6-7 billion at $150 billion market cap. Let's see how many oil companies have a $150 billion market cap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a company that's making less than, $5 billion. So now people say, oh, this is nonsense. This is hype. Well, heck, look at NVIDIA.
Right.
It's over $3 trillion. So it is not hype. Let's get real. Let's get on the bandwagon. Let's invest. Let's adopt. Let's take it beyond a curiosity.
Yeah. No, it reminds me when I remember when I first played with, I don't even remember which model it was. It was either 2 or 3, but when it first came out and I started playing with it, and I was like, man, this reminds me very much so of the first time I used the internet. Like that like you can see how this is going to completely change things for everyone. And so it was one of those things where it's like, man, this is cool. But the flip side of that is I like hearing people talk about it that aren't as up to speed on it or whatever. It reminds me of that. There's a Today Show clip of Katie Couric and Matt Lauer and Al Roker talking about email, like from 95 or something, 94, like early 90s. And like, oh, what? They're just going to send a message and then it goes to their magic inbox and people are just going to communicate. Like they were just mocking the shit out of it. Right. And it's like 25 years later, look what happened.
25 years later, look what happened. Absolutely. And it's I remember I was right here, not far from your place. We're very close partners with NVIDIA as a company. We do a lot of work. We are actually one of the premier partners of NVIDIA. So I was, making a presentation at their, big event they had here in the Westin Hotel. And when, Jensen Huang was making a speech, about generative AI and all the things. This was about 1.5 years ago. He said, it's the iPhone moment for AI. I mean, and it really hit me. It is the iPhone. I remember when I first got my iPhone, how I was like completely blown away. We are at this cross moment in our, careers, in our lifetime, it's a generational shift. And this is going to change a lot of things. I'm not sure that everybody understands it. We're looking at it, oh, this is another drilling technology. This is another gizmo. This is another sensor. This is another downhole gauge. Oh, this is a new ESP, system or whatever. No, it's a little bit beyond that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's because it's so dynamic too. All the things that you know what I mean? It's not like when machine learning models first came out, it was clear for me at least that they had a lot of really interesting practical use cases for, production data. And like, we have these big data sets and these static assets, and there's things going on all the time, and we just need to optimize those things for whatever variables. But I also think because they're so flexible, it also becomes hard for people initially to understand all the possibilities of it, right? I do think it's interesting, or like, I've bitched for years about how all of the important data in the oil field goes into a PDF somewhere to die instead of into a database. It's all your post-job reports, all these reports we've got.
We have a generative AI lab in our company. We have a big team dedicated just, doing solutions across multiple. By the way, we work across all the different.
Right.
So we are very close partners. We're premier partners with AWS. Same thing with Microsoft. So we work with, all of them, with Google as well. So I have worked with my team to develop applications for oil and gas. So we've used everything from ChatGPT to Gemini to Claude to all of them. So we have a platform, our own platform called Talk to Data. So I was just curious the other day. I said, I'm going to do something. So I had a bunch of documents, reports on electrical submersible pumps failures, right? So I went in, uploaded the documents. It takes a while for the large language model to digest all of this, but it was a half an hour.
Yeah, it's not crazy.
But I didn't upload like a zillion documents. And literally I started after half an hour asking a question. What about this? What about that? What if I have an overcurrent? What if I have a motor overload? What happened? What should I do? And this thing was giving me some serious good answers. Of course, I know about a lot of stuff, but it told me some things that, oh shoot, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So things like this. What are we doing? Like, speaking about the PDF document. By the way, those documents I uploaded were PDF documents. What are we doing with all of that?
Exactly.
Where's all of that going?
Yeah.
You mean to tell me? And by the way, as an industry, we are among many industries. If you take all different industries, we have the highest age, and in the 55 to 65 bracket, we have the highest percentage among most industries.
Yeah.
Right? Almost, they estimate close to 15 to 18%. Almost, some people estimate almost 20% are within 2 years of retirement. So those people that know so much and they left so much knowledge, I'm not sure. I mean, I love young people. They are brilliant, but knowledge matters and experience matters.
Well, especially, I'm a perfect example, right? I came in during the shale boom. Almost all of my experience the first 3-4 years was exclusively U.S. onshore shale.
Yeah.
Then I went to work for another frac company that almost exclusively focused on vertical frac work, just conventional. I learned way more about frac in the 9 months that I worked for that company right before the 2015 downturn than I ever did the 3-4 years before that working unconventionals, because unconventionals, there's plenty of science that happens in the office on the back end, but once it gets to the field level, it's almost like copy and paste the same design every single frac stage you do when you're in the field. And so it was one of those things where it's like, man, like, for example, perfect example, on a conventional well, you would get your ass chewed out if you overflushed by half of a barrel when you flush on a frac job. I overflushed intentionally every single stage because the company man told me to on all of my shale wells that I ever fracked.
Absolutely.
It's like completely different methodologies. And had I never worked for that conventional company, I would have never known that. And that's the scariest part for me, is that, we might have equal amount of times focusing on the unconventional stuff, but there's this whole other conventional world that a lot of people that came in the after 2000 don't really, most of them at least, don't have much experience with unless they worked internationally or offshore, right? And so it's like, that's a shit ton of knowledge that's also incredibly important, is not going away anytime soon. That is going to be, a lot of it is going to be lost because of
a lot of it
this
is
crew
going to
change.
be, believe me, not only that. Let me tell you something that, you know, I when I talk to people, they ask me, it's a very simple and honest, and it's not a dumb question. Why AI? What is the big deal? And why generative AI? And I go back to, so I used to work for Baker Hughes,
Mm-hmm.
right? My job, I was senior director of advanced drilling technology, right? My job, my team, we were about 150 people. Half of them are PhDs, to design the latest and greatest drilling tools. To come, so our business was to build MWDs, advanced drilling systems, all of this kind of stuff. To build a new MWD, measurement while drilling or logging while drilling tool, a new, brand new one.
Right.
We're talking about 5 to 6 years. This is to build it,
Right.
to develop the technology.
Right.
Then from there on, as a drilling service company,
Right.
we had to roll it out.
Yep.
As a service company, you got to send it to Malaysia. You
Right.
got to send it to Abu Dhabi. You got to send it to Nigeria. I mean, it's rolling out the technology. And look at the difference now. You have a piece of software. Right? Software, we can develop it a lot faster. It's a lot cheaper, right?
And it scales.
And it scales, and you deploy it a lot faster. I can deploy systems all over the world with a click of a button.
Yep.
You know, and then doesn't mean that we don't need new drilling systems. If you have an ESP, electrical submersible pumps, you know, probably the estimate is more than 55% of the world oil come from wells with ESP.
Mm-hmm.
It is a hugely important system in our business. It is like running a Ferrari in the ground, right? Hundreds of horsepower.
Yeah.
And by the way, you cannot fix it.
Right.
You cannot repair an ESP. You run it until it dies.
Yeah.
Now, isn't it wise to use some smart things to optimize, to prolong the life of this ESP instead of, you know, having it run for 3 years? Maybe you can run it for 3.5 years or 4 years. Imagine what advanced and intelligent software and AI can help you with. And by the way, I worked on a lot of, you know, companies. One day we did a study in a previous company I worked for, and we found out that almost at any point in time, less than, you know, 60% of our ESPs were running with optimal production.
I was going to say,
meaning, yeah,
you were talking about the cost side, but then there's also the revenue side, right?
Optimal. I mean, I'm talking about a well that could be producing, you know, let's just throw a number, 1,000 barrels a day,
right?
And it is only based on the efficiency of the pump, based on the well, based on this, based on that, based on the models. But it's only producing 750. So you're wasting 250 barrels a day, maybe by just changing the frequency from, you know, 58 hertz to 62 hertz.
Right.
So this is where the technology comes in.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that specific thing, right? Just that incremental production is literally the difference in being profitable or not on these unconventional wells in most cases.
Let me tell you what worries me right now. I have a near term to midterm worry about our industry. Speaking of recent development, and I'm going to bring you to why our technology like AI and advanced and digitalization really are so critical. Today, the break-even cost of existing wells in the Permian is somewhere around $38 a barrel, $38, $39 a barrel. This is according to Dallas Federal Reserve. The new wells is somewhere around $65.
I read an article this week. They're 65, going up, right?
65. In some of the shale wells, it's close to 70. Where's oil prices right now?
70.
It's not that far. But what worries me is because right now the Saudis and OPEC decided they are going to give up their production, hold on production. So they're going to pump more oil. And if oil prices go down to the $60 range and below 60 in the 50s, we're going to start to see some pain. So the lesson of the day is you got to take care of your existing wells.
Yep.
Because that's where the gold is.
Right.
That's where most of your production is coming from. So how do you do it? Intelligent system, smart systems. I'm not saying AI is going to give you all the solution, but definitely it's one of the recipes.
So let's get into that. What are some use cases, some examples of some stuff that you guys have deployed? And
well, we're doing on the deployment side. So we have two things. Okay, we have things that we're deploying with clients. We have things that we invest a lot of money internally. So on the deployment side, we're using extensively AI to do subsurface data processing, accelerate the process. Things that take you days or weeks.
Is that mostly like seismic data?
Seismic data. We can do it in seconds. One of our hallmark cases that we have done in the last year and a half, 2 years. So one of our clients, Vital Energy, which has been investing tremendously in digitalization and AI. We were talking about ESPs earlier. So we have deployed AI, data-driven systems to help them monitor properly, model, the production.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal is to give them recommendations to optimize their production. We have deployed on hundreds of wells. I mean, they're achieving results that are astronomical in terms of increasing production. It's all AI based.
Yeah.
Where we model the well, we model the production, we do predictive modeling. We say, okay, now your well, there are two things that you can control the well with. One is the frequency of the pump and the wellhead pressure.
Right.
So we give them recommendation. We say, change the frequency of the pump from point A to point B. So now we're not automating the process of the control yet, back to the well, but the operators look at this and say, well, it makes sense. So next day when they go to the well, they change the frequency. And by the way, you can fully automate the process.
I was going to say, so it's human in the loop that's how it most
by the way,
right?
but they're going toward full automation.
Yeah. You got to get them comfortable with
Absolutely. So we work on those kind of applications a lot. We're investing a lot in generative AI, right now, and on methane. So we have a big initiative called Methane IQ for methane data management. So methane, as you know, is a huge headache right now for the industry. It's when a problem becomes also goes beyond a technical problem.
Yeah, when it's politicized.
When it's politicized, becoming social problem. Becomes you start to, as an industry, we start to get a lot of bad rap. So now there's a lot of new technologies that are coming to the scene. Before we used to use what we call optical gas imaging cameras. We go around, we do the survey. Now we're using satellites, we're using drones. So we're developing a lot of computer vision technologies to analyze satellite data, to use drone data, and also to automate the reporting to the EPA. So we can take your data wherever it is, congregate it, and automate. Let's say, for example, I'm not going to get too buzzwordy here, but let's say the EPA wants subpart W or quad OB report, and it's usually in a particular XML format. So we automate all of that. So you don't even have to touch anything.
Right. Whereas before you would have to hire analysts that was their full-time job.
No, not only that, because once you capture the data and we get it from SCADA, we get it from OGI, and then you have to transform it. Then there's another Excel sheet, and then there is this, and you have to go look at the meta file by hand, and you have to transform. I mean, it was a nightmare.
Yeah.
The area that I mentioned earlier is Gen AI. Gen AI for me is gone beyond fascination. So, for example, we've developed several use cases for Gen AI. We're talking about methane. We have a Gen AI system that is connected to the EPA. All right, live connection. Right, we have an API connecting to the EPA. EPA has 413 documents. Okay. 413. Some of them are 2,000 pages, my friend. Believe me. About yes, it's about, and this is on upstream oil and gas. All of greenhouse gases. So we got all of these documents connected to this Gen AI system. Okay, and then the system checks, like, if we can have a check every day or every week or every month for a new update, for a new regulation, and then you can go this Gen AI and say, you know what, under the new rules, okay, am I allowed to flare gas? Right, and the system will go and tell you, here it is, this, do that, and here's the document. Here's specifically the page where you can get this information. We're using also Gen AI, for example. Speaking of ESP, we were talking about ESP. For instance, let's just say you have a diagnostic system that you're looking at your motor current, your motor temperature, your input pressure, discharge pressure, variety, and this is going too high, this is going too low. So then you're sitting there, and let's just say you're a junior engineer. I have no idea what the hell is going on, right? And then you can click on a button right there on the screen and say, hey, I see these symptoms. Tell me what could be the problem, right? Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to take this as the Bible, right? Yep. But this is a preliminary assessment, and this is based on a bunch of reports.
I was going to say, I want to unpack this, because I think this is where people, like, the line between it being like the average person sees something like this and they're like, oh, it understands. Like, they think they're getting in that AGI train of thought almost, even if they don't know what AGI means, right? Like, they think these models can comprehend almost, right? Like, because the results are so good. Yeah. But the reality of the situation is, if you have, that's why, like, I'm right there with you, is there's so many things that we do in probably every industry, but in our industry specifically, that are like 99% of it is repetitive, and 1% of it changes.
Absolutely.
And so that's exactly what these models are perfect for, because they're statistical recommendations based off what they know. And if what they know is only those procedure documents, it's going to be able to tell you historically, this is what it should say, or has happened.
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly, you said 99% is repetitive. The information is there. It looked at a whole bunch of reports. And this is what we're telling clients right now. Going back to what we were talking about earlier. All this stuff that you have been storing in PDF files, your failure, your reliability report, all of this. Where is that information? Are you leveraging it? Is it making your enterprise smarter? You have to use it, because there is no question. This is your gold.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's where most of the important data lives.
You got oil in the ground. Knowledge is gold. That's your other asset. That's your other reservoir. We have a reservoir of oil, physical, and then we have a knowledge reservoir. So another area that we're working on in generative, and we have a fascinating demonstration. So in oil and gas, companies, we have cameras all over the place, and we use cameras, near the wells. We have them in facilities, in refining, and upstream, downstream, midstream, not as much, because pipelines are far. So here we do it for safety.
Yep.
For people's safety, making sure they're not doing stupid things, that they're, especially also sometimes in environmental events. The company I used to work for, we were paranoid about H2S problems. We've had people die in the past. So you want to know, in case there is an hydrogen sulfide, emission, are people is there anybody there out there that should not be there? We use it for security, right? For perimeter security. And, we're a little bit paranoid, and, some parts of the world are extremely, we've seen a lot of sabotage, and also for material delivery.
Right.
Let's say you have a fracking job, right? Did my truck arrive? Did this arrive? Am I expecting? So we connected, this is actually, we're working with one of our clients. We connected to a whole bunch of their cameras, CCTV cameras. And then we asked the Gen AI, did my truck arrive yesterday? Right? Is the job, you see any bulldozers
Right.
moving in this area? Do you see any people moving around in this site? Have you seen anybody who should not be there? And the system will tell you, here's what I saw, and will show you the exact frames when it saw that information.
Yeah.
So you can train these generative AI systems to do a whole lot of things, not only with text, but with video, with images.
I was going to say that's another point here is that, everyone because they're large language models, everyone thinks of them as almost exclusively around written text.
No.
But with how fast all of this has moved and continues to move, the multimodal stuff is just fascinating, right? Like
this is the next this is the next horizon. We're going way beyond text.
Yep.
We are going to be using all sorts of forms of, whether it's voice, it's text, it's images, it's videos.
Yeah.
The sky is the limit. It's a very exciting arena, and I'm hoping, and I'm going back to, I've seen the industry sometimes take too much of a conservative, oh, well, it's we're curious about Gen AI. Let's think about it. Well, you got to go beyond thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's always my advice. If you're interested in it, go play with it. Go force yourself to use ChatGPT or whichever one is your favorite for a week straight for as many tasks as you possibly can, all the way down to like the simplest. I need to cook dinner tonight. So what am I going to cook for dinner? Well, take a picture of what's in your pantry and ask it to make you a recipe, and it can do that. I mean, there's so, even like, because before, the knowledge transfer thing is a big thing on our end as well. And I think this is a home run for Gen AI stuff. But you think about, this historically in the oil field, the way that you train people is you went and you rotated them. They went and worked drilling for 6 months. They went and worked completions for 6 months. They went and worked production or a year, however long it is, right? How does that work when these cycles get shorter, the industry cycles get shorter, and we have this faster up and down cycle? Like, you can't scale companies over years by hiring and training people. You have to have people that can sit down and hit the ground running, especially, with a lot of the private equity oil and gas companies and stuff like that. And so like these language models are perfect examples of that. And using the multimodal, I think people don't think about the fact that like AAR meetings, for example, this is a perfect use case. Every major company does AAR meetings after pretty much everything they do. No one records them. They have a note taker.
That's right.
But no one records them. I don't know why. But even historically, if they did, you'd still have to send that off and have someone transcribe it and do all this stuff. Now, if you you take out your phone, set it up in the room, it doesn't even have to have the video, just the audio, and then you can feed it into a Whisper. There's a number of them now that will transcribe it incredibly accurately, very cheaply.
Copilot does it beautifully.
And then it goes into your vector database, and now it's there forever.
Yeah,
right?
If you're on team, you can do it with Copilot. You don't have to record anything anymore. You can transcribe the whole thing. But let's. I mentioned to you my concerns, and yes, and this is what happened. We have a tendency, for somebody like me who's been in this business for a long time, there's always this tendency to be a little bit euphoric. Like, say, for example, right now we're producing 13.2 million barrels a day. Fantastic. We're at a record level. And by the way, we've achieved that through incredible, advancement in drilling, no question about it. We've achieved it through also advancement in hydraulic fracturing, all of this stuff. But let me tell you, the other reason is we're at 13.2 million barrels a day. We're not drilling as much. The number of rigs is significantly down from a few years ago. So the question that people ask me is like, how is that possible? It's all from efficiency in drilling. I said, no. Well, in COVID, we drilled a lot of wells which we did not complete.
Yep, all the ducks.
Right? So those are, coming online. But the reason I'm concerned, and we need to push technology on the digital side, on the AI, on the generative AI, is because we have a lot of problems. If you look at the Permian, we have several issues that people need to pay attention to. When you drill a well, your peak production right? A few months later, we reach a peak production, and then you have the production. So if you look at the production decline curve, in the last 2.5 years, it has gone down by almost 10%, right? That peak.
Yeah.
So that's telling us something. We are drilling longer, more lateral wells, and we're not getting as much out of them.
Less barrels per foot.
So also the enhanced recovery from our reservoir. And by the way, we're still at almost a little bit less than 40% in terms of reservoir recovery.
I mean, that's on the high side too, right?
That's on the high side.
Argue that's on the high side.
That's on the high side. You have to go to some places in the Middle East to find out more better recovery, which somewhere I worked. You have to pay. And then the last thing I want to mention, in terms of new discoveries, we're at an 8-decade low.
Yeah.
The biggest discovery in the last 10 years, 12 years, most of it has come, the largest one in Guyana, almost 12 to 14% of the new discovery from one country. So we need to understand that things are becoming more challenging. Mm-hmm. The honeymoon is not going to be forever.
Right.
So when we talk about technology, we talk about it as a technologist. This is my life dedication. That technology has to prepare you for the challenges of the future.
Yeah.
And we have to invest in those kinds of things. Again, it's not only about AI or generative AI. There's a whole range of things we need to invest. And that's why I've always been very critical, me working in a senior role in some of the oil companies, is that we got to invest a little bit more in R&D. We don't, as an industry, we don't invest enough, right? I mean, compared to pharmaceutical, of course.
Yeah. Well, it's a
high
weird,
tech.
It's a weird industry because innovation, in my experience, innovation comes when prices are low, which is when no one has the budgets to innovate. And then when prices are too, like if there's a sweet spot, right? Like the last, 5-7 years have been in this $60 to $90 kind of range. If you get too high above that, then the mentality changes. Like the mentality when I came out of school directly into the field was get it out of the ground as quickly as we can before prices go back down. Like, if you boiled it all the way down, that's ultimately basically what it was, right? Like, never forget my first year in the field. I vividly remember a job sitting in the van. We were shut down because we had screened out, and there's like 6, 8, 10 sand trucks sitting there parked, charging me demurrage, just because no one informed the sand haulers that we were shut down.
That's right.
And so now you have all these compounding things that happen, but no one gave a shit, even though they were charging us $20,000 a day or whatever the hell it was. No one cared. But then when prices get back below a certain point, then everyone hyper focuses on how do we do more with less, because we got to lower our break even, our lifting costs and all this stuff. But then there's no budget normally for it. It's such a weird.
This is what I was mentioning earlier. I do see it's not going to be like this forever, but I do see a period where maybe it might happen 2025 because of the OPEC increase in production that might hit the oil prices. So have to do better in getting our margins better.
Yeah.
How do you improve your margins? Is because you're producing things a lot more efficiently. Mm-hmm. How do you produce more efficiently? You have to deploy technology. You have to do smart. You have to do it in a smarter way.
It's not like it's a crazy like grand plan either, right? Like that's literally the point of technology is to make things more efficient. It's not a grand plan.
It's about the state of readiness.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a job to do, and I do a lot of, as much as I focus on technology and solutions and building stuff, my job is a lot of times as I preach about these things.
Yeah.
And some people don't get it. Like, what the hell is this guy talking about? I tell them I've been there.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said. All of a sudden, when the price go down, it was scrambling, and then we start laying off people again, right?
Then we lay everybody off. Then we need to do more with less. Then we need to innovate, but we don't have budgets to innovate with. So then how the hell are we supposed to innovate?
Yeah.
And
the industry has done well. And I give them a lot of credit, of course, in terms of, managing capital expenditures, being more responsible in how they spend the money. I don't think they're going crazy on the drilling side. But we have to get to a point. I think this consolidation, by the way,
Yeah.
in the industry is going to, help, kind of do a lot of restraining. The big companies don't want to go crazy with production, because ultimately it's not good for anybody.
Yeah, the bigger the company, the longer the game they're trying to play, right? So it's a lot easier for them to.
It's I mean, a lot of people when they ask me, say, "Oh, now that they, ConocoPhillips did this acquisition, ExxonMobil did this, Chevron, did this oil production." I said, "No, precisely because of the op. They are buying."
Right, they're
their
buying
objective. They're buying the assets.
Right, they're buying the
They're buying the
reserves.
assets. Their job. They're not thinking about, oh, we're gonna, do this acquisition. We're gonna increase production.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if you combine the two productions of the two companies, Chevron and Hess, right? In the future, it might be less.
It's going to be less. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. 1 + 1 is not going to be 2.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit less than 2.
Yeah. No, I think that's another weird part about our industry, right? Is that you get to a point at a company's, at least at an operator's life cycle, where you either have to buy or you have to sell. Like you can't, you always have to be buying to grow if you're an oil and gas company, because it's a depreciating asset or depleting asset essentially. Yeah. Right. So once you buy it, the minute you start producing, it's depleting. Yeah. And so if you're trying to grow revenue and company value, that's part of your asset. So you just buy more of it.
Yeah. I mean, some of these acquisitions are precisely for a particular reason, like now a lot of, offshore Guyana, Suriname, all of these discoveries that are happening there. This is the hot part of the world. It used to be West Africa. Brazil is still pretty active. Gulf of Mexico is kind of cooling down a little bit. U.S. still has a lot of oil. It is going to become more challenging to produce it. It's not an easy thing. It's becoming more and more difficult in some parts, but and here's the thing, the world is going to need more oil.
Yep.
I mean, OPEC and EIA, they have differences, but I definitely think, and now we're about 101, 102 million barrels a day. We're soon going to need 110 million. Now, to get 8 million barrels more,
right?
I worked, I spent several years working at Kuwait Oil Company before I joined. So it is one of the most prolific parts of the world. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, UAE. We start to see alarming trends. There are some areas where water production was increasing in 6 months, from having 15% water cut to 30% water cut. This is in some of the best reservoirs in the world.
Right.
So you start to see production challenges even in some of the best places in the world. So if it happens there, it's going to happen here.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to think about in, the terms that you just outlined, right? Where it's not only, okay, you're producing now 15% less oil, so revenues should be going down because of that. But then you also have the incremental new cost of getting rid of that water as well. So it hits it on both sides.
A lot of people don't realize it. In our business, we produce water.
Yeah, water that no one wants and you can't really do much with.
No one wants. We produce a lot of water. So I mean, some places you're producing 80-90% water cut.
Yep.
So yeah, and then you got 10% oil. So yeah, and then you have to do something with the water.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. People don't think about it just from like a revenue perspective, right? So, okay, I increase my water cut, which means I'm producing less oil, or I have to produce more volume of fluid to produce the same amount of oil, regardless. So my revenue goes down. But then because I'm also producing more water, the cost to produce all those same barrels of oil goes up. So now my margins are squeezed even more.
That water is a bad news because that water has you have to take care of it. Yep. You have to clean it up. It has environmental consequences. there has been many incidents where some serious penalties have been levied because of spilled produced water.
Yeah. Well, now you've got to be careful here with the earthquakes about how
I
you
was
inject it.
I was talking to a friend of mine who amazing satellite technology company called Satellytics. So they do a lot of emission monitoring, right? But also they monitor other things. They monitor vegetation, they monitor water, But he was telling me shocked me. He was talking to the CEO of one of the largest insurance companies in the country. And he told him, he said, you're worried about methane? Methane is a problem. But he said, insurance companies, we are a lot more concerned about produced water incidents than methane because of the environmental effect of it. So, so yes, we have to pay. So water is not good news. It's not, people think it's drinking water.
No. Yeah. That's I know that's such a weird element of, of our industry is, we produce water, but it's water that is terrible. I did want to touch on kind of your, only because Bobby and I both worked in the kind of IoT space as well. I wanted to touch on some of your IoT experience and just how that has kind of evolved over the decades.
It has evolved. It has evolved a lot. I spent so I think I told you, so I dedicated a good deal of my career till even today on digital oil field. So some of the initiatives I worked on, some of the projects were massive projects. And what I mean by massive, I mean, so to give you a perspective, I was in charge of 3 major initiative projects in Kuwait. The budget that we set aside for 10 years was in excess of $300 million. So it was massive. And there, we were talking about complete rehaul, starting from the well, all the sensors, or the IoTs, on the surface, on the subsurface, but on the surface side, having sensors, having wireless sensors in many cases. We deployed wireless sensors. So the push for wireless is big.
Yeah.
So as you know, you've been in the, in the IoT business. So a well has, you could put a pressure, sensor, temperature
rate,
sensor. And by the way, for your information, in Texas, the cost of putting the sensors, right, installing the sensors, running the cable is more expensive than the sensor, right? Because it's a nightmare. And by the way, trucks run over the cable and all sorts of mess. So we've been pushing extensively, and I've been pushing extensively for wireless sensors, right? Wireless IoTs to transmit the data. And that's evolving really rapidly. Now, what's happening is we've seen the technology evolve where you have the point to multi-point, kind of bringing it into a gateway, right? And from the gateway, you have your telemetry, your long-haul telemetry. What I'm really excited about, and I started some projects there when I was in Kuwait, because this issue of, getting the data long haul back, right? And even here, because you have to pay to transmit the data, right? So you cannot be putting sometimes SIM, communication, whether satellite or using the cellular service on every well. So why don't we congregate a bunch of wells, okay? The sensors sending their data into one hub and then transmitting it. But the challenge was a lot of the early generation IoTs, wireless sensors, they did only a few meters, right? So I got really excited when I discovered LoRa.
I was going to ask you about LoRaWAN.
I think LoRaWAN is a game changer. It's a true game changer because, and so let me give you an example of how we did it. So we had several wells, within several miles, dispersed. And then what we do is we transmit via wireless sensor, LoRa sensors to one gateway. So now I'm using one gateway. All right, let's just give you just run a number for 10 wells.
Right, instead of one per well.
Instead of one per well. And then I had to set up now in that project, we were using broadband telemetry back to the main control center. But those broadband, they cost a lot of money to install and this and that. Or you could be using maybe the cellular communication. Could maybe using AT&T or Verizon or whatever. So it's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more cost effective. And LoRaWAN is extremely reliable.
And it transmits for miles too.
It transmits for miles.
Yeah.
You could set it up. So that, I think, is the next in terms of communication, in terms of sensors, IoTs. On the other hand, you were asking me about IoT in terms of intelligence at the edge. I think in some areas, in some applications, we definitely need the edge, because right now, the reason we transmit data every 10, 15 minutes from many wells or locations is because of the communication cost, right? But if you can do things at the edge, right? We're working with our partners, NVIDIA, just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
So we have a very close relationship. So now NVIDIA, they have a Jetson, which is a tiny GPU, right? This thing used to be probably not a long time ago was
the size of my phone.
Was a $10,000 thing. Now it's about $1,500.
Yeah, they're cheap.
So you imagine what you can do with a Jetson GPU at the edge processing your data, where you don't have to transmit all the time. You can do maybe smart control, So the technology is evolving now. It's people like, for example, I was in a meeting yesterday talking about some edge technology with so we at Softserve, we prepared a package offering with NVIDIA, an edge offering, an IoT edge offering, right? And specifically, we're doing it for analysis of video cameras, right? So you want to deploy it, very cheap, very cost effective.
Video is one of the best use cases for edge.
Yeah, because video, you're crunching video. You're not
big data.
Yeah, you have a lot of pixels.
Well, and the other interesting thing. So before I worked at DW, I worked for an edge startup for a year. So I love talking edge because I think it's a really fascinating space. But one of the I just completely blanked on my thought, but the video. The really fascinating thing we had conversations with Walmart, right? And we were talking about edge deployments with them. And they said something along the lines of, we've got however many cameras per store, and they've got thousands of stores all over the world, right? But then they said, give or take 10 to 12 hours per day of that camera footage data is basically nothing. It's empty aisles. And it's like, historically, they would be sending that data to a server somewhere for it to do what? Literally nothing, because there's nothing of value that can come from that half of the data set. The other half of the data set's very important, right? There's people walking around. They want it for insurance and liability reasons. They want it for all kinds of stuff. Understanding how people walk through the stores and the flow through the store and all this stuff. But just from that perspective of literally I can cut out half of the data, half of my data transfer costs, half of my data storage costs, half of my compute costs. It just goes away.
It's so you think okay, let's just say, you have hundreds or thousands of cameras. Oh, I'm going to transmit all this video and it's going to sit on a server. Are you serious?
Right. Who's going to do it? What are they going to do with it?
And by the way, storing video, a lot of people don't understand, because I've done, work a lot of image processing, computer vision. You have an image, 512 by 512 pixels. By the way, this is like a really low resolution crap, versus, megapixels, right? Where each pixel in a color video is could be 8-bit, 64-bit. I mean, you're talking about a lot of bits, man. That all of a sudden, and by the way, cameras they capture a lot of them 30 frames a second, right? Or some of them even
60,
more.
Yeah,
some of them even more frames per second. So imagine now you have to transmit all this video versus processing it right there on the edge, extracting whatever information, sending only the results back, and then people can look at it. We are working as a departure from oil and gas application. We have a huge project in believe it or not, in Ecuador, with NVIDIA as a partner. So in Ecuador, they had a lot of security problems.
Mm-hmm.
Country has been, facing a lot of security, kidnapping, this, that, all sorts of things. And they had cameras already, all over the city, and we installed more cameras. So now we have this very intelligent system that analyzes the videos. So they say there is a kidnapping that might be happening. Literally, the system will tell you, will give you a warning, or there is an incident, there's that, and they will analyze people's behavior as well. So it's not only about getting, cars, license plate and that kind of stuff. So we're deploying these things at a large scale, and it's really proving. And now they started with Quito, the capital, and now they're going to roll it out across the whole country.
Man, what is that movie? Minority Report?
Yeah. It's exactly.
That's crazy.
I was exactly.
Well, I remember.
It was Minority Report. Yes,
with was that Tom Cruise in that?
Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Yes.
I remember years ago, somebody, like a family friend, told me about this company to look at, just stock trading stuff, and it's called ShotSpotter. And all it is, I won't oversimplify it, but it's similar in a lot of senses about this, but it's around, they basically deploy acoustic arrays, and they can identify gunshots from ambient sound for miles or whatever. So they've started deploying these in cities, tying it back to the police stations, so that if one of those triggers, it can alert someone to go to it. But when I first heard that, I was like, oh man, that's kind of getting creepy. Like, yes, I don't want people, I want cops deployed where people are and there's gunfire, but then you layer things like this on top of it. And I actually, a fun recent news article that we could talk about is, I saw a video yesterday. Someone has now taken the new Meta glasses, the ones that, Zuckerberg revealed a couple weeks ago, has taken that and then added basically a reverse image lookup. So like, I could walk up to you, it'll use computer vision, find your face, and then take a picture of your face and go reverse image look up your face to see if it can find who you are, all in the display. And so this guy was just walking up to strangers and being like, "Are you so-and-so doctor at this?" Oh
my God.
And and I'm like, man, like that could be really cool, but that's also super creepy.
That is creepy, man.
And of course it's like, you can only imagine what all the governments have that
we don't. There is obviously, like when we're talking about video analysis with AI, Gen AI, there is a lot of caution with that because there's a lot of privacy issues. In the case of the project we're doing in Ecuador, it's just the country is reeling from all this violence. And so they figured, we got to do something. Now, probably something like this may not work in the United States because then you're really, violation of people's rights, etc. But there are some things, even when we are deploying computer vision for worker safety. There is a lot of, so like, for example, only can do, like are they wearing the gear? They're wearing the helmet,
the PPE.
The PPE. So you don't go into like who is doing it because you got to get really sensitive because people may say, hey, are you monitoring me? Are you following me?
Well, but like the flip side of that too. I didn't think about this until, after I left the field and got married and had kids and stuff. But it's like, shit, man. Outside of my cell phone and me literally writing my name down on a piece of paper on location that could literally burn in a fire if something happened.
You could.
No one would have any idea whether I was on that location or not.
Absolutely.
Literally, no one would know. I was supposed to be, but how would they know if that piece of paper was gone? Right. And it's like, there's 100%. All these additional things. And as someone who loves technology, I think it is effectively a corporate responsibility of oil and gas companies, both operator and service side, to leverage technologies to keep their employees as safe as possible. Because
I am a living proof because, like I said, in Kuwait, in some of the wells we had an H2S problem, and it's a silent killer. That thing will kill you, and we're not talking about in hours, in minutes. So we had a responsibility. That's why we deployed a lot of cameras to make sure that in case there is an incident, immediately there is people out of there, and you deploy your ambulances, your support team, and all of this to get them out of there. So yeah, I mean, it's not even an option for us. If you done work in offshore environment, it's very, very serious business. Onshore environments, I have seen some people doing stupid things and
Yeah.
getting hurt.
Well, it's
You
just
know,
crazy to me because it's like, okay, you're required, when I first started, uh, you had to wear FRs, you had to wear a hard hat and safety glasses and steel toes. Um, Shortly before that, you didn't even have to wear FRs, right? You just needed hard hat, steel toes, and glasses. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you require all these safe, like, um, these safety precautions in case something happens, but then why aren't we actively making sure that people aren't putting themselves knowingly or unknowingly in unsafe situations through computer vision and things like
it
that?
is
Like
the
it's super
biggest.
simple.
It is the single biggest nightmare of a company, oil energy company. I know, working in energy company,
Mhm.
for somebody, one of your people to be killed
Yeah.
in the field. That is has you don't understand the impact. So that's why if you work for, let's say on every company that I work, first thing when you go to a meeting, and you don't see that in any other industry, right?
Right.
You
The
know,
safety moment.
the safety moment. Here are your exits. Here's this.
Mhm.
Here's that. They tell you everything. Where everything is in case this, in case that. You don't see that in too many industries. I mean,
No.
we're not. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say we're the only industry, but you don't
Yeah.
go to a banking,
No.
finance, meeting, and you see that. So we do care about HSE is something we take very seriously.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's one of those where, in my opinion, there really shouldn't be, like, we should leverage technology to eliminate on-site injuries, fatalities, all of this stuff, because a lot of the time it is preventable if the tech is in place. And so I think that's yet another one. And that's also one of those that isn't like, well, if we implement this and it's not perfect, the world's going to end kind of thing,
Yeah, I
right?
mean,
Like
this
that's
is. I,
always the
I
big,
agree with you. I mean, we of course everything we want to perfect it has to be work 100%. No, if you can deploy it, and whatever imperfection it has,
Mhm.
it is not hurtful, it's
Right.
not harmful.
Exactly.
It's okay.
And they get better as all things do over time.
Even if it is 80% of the time accurate, that 20% is not hurting anybody. Use it, deploy it,
Right.
leverage it.
No, that's when I was working for the edge company, HiveCell, one of the use cases for computer vision that I would put in there was, I don't remember which university did the study, but it was they had a bunch of doctors analyze mammograms, then they had an AI model analyze the mammograms independently, then they had the doctors analyze them in conjunction, or either before or after, I don't remember, the AI model. And the doctors by themselves identified it, whatever it was, 60, 70% of the time. The model by itself identified it roughly the same.
Yeah.
Together, they identified it like 80 to 90%, 85, 90%. And just that, it's not perfect, again, 80, 90%, but that delta that
delta
came up
is
was
a big
millions
deal.
of people that
That
got
delta is
saved,
a big deal. Yeah.
right? Like they saved these people's lives.
trivial
Right?
stuff,
It's not
no?
trivial at all. So yeah, when people say 80%, they're like, oh, well, I don't know. If something did 80% of the task that you're currently dreading doing right now,
it's
you would
good
be very
stuff, huh?
happy. That's exactly what I tell people about the gen stuff, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not always going to be perfect, but it's a hell of a lot
No.
faster than doing a
No.
lot of things by hand.
And by the way, I tell them the same thing. Those few times where it's going to screw up, it's not going to kill anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like that's one of the reasons I want to talk. Like I try and talk as on the show about it as much as possible, so that people because if you don't understand it, then you can make that mistake. If you don't understand how these things work and that it's not always going to be exactly perfect, and that you should take it with a grain of salt, and you should make sure you double check.
That's the case in a lot of the. Forget about Gen AI.
Right.
Like
Any of it.
it goes back to my years in drilling. Like for example, when my team we developed some of the latest and greatest measurement while drilling tools, all these sensors and resistivity and porosity and this and that, and nuclear, and even we did magnetic resonance imagery.
Mhm.
I remember I had a project developing to integrate magnetic resonance, which is like an MRI for the ground, in one of the tools. And somebody says, well, was telling me, I was like, hell, It's not going to be super accurate. It's not. I said, if it gives me 70% accuracy, 70%, I don't want even 80 or 90%. It's telling me a lot more.
Right.
Because that's something I see that I didn't see before.
Exactly.
So we don't have to be always, spot on. All right. The same thing when we were developing resistivity tools. Oh, well, I can do this much penetration and while I'm drilling, in terms of seeing in the ground. Well, in the well bore. Well, okay, well, if I don't reach the exact, depth, it's fine. I'm going a lot deeper than what I was going before. So come on, guys. So not everything has to be perfection. So sometimes we pick a lot more on AI and software because we trust the hardware.
Right.
We're steel people, in the industry. We love steel. We love steel metal.
No, that's very true. It's well, like I said, but then you flip it. I think it's just an engineering problem, right? Like as an engineer, if I hear 80%, I'm like, oh, that's not great.
Yeah.
But the real world, what 80% means in the real world of the actual application or use cases, when you're the one who's having to do it, is completely.
So, for example,
different.
I was mentioning to you earlier. So we had these Gen AI use cases where the system takes your, some information and this is what the symptoms based on what you're telling me. This is what could be the problem with your electrical submersible pump. I tell people this is not what you're gonna take it and you're gonna make decisions right there.
Right.
The system is gonna give you some basic information based on previous report. It's your job to go to your team and say, let's analyze the situation. This could be one of 4 or 5 scenarios.
Right.
Maybe it missed one scenario. Maybe it made a mistake on one scenario. But it's not the end of the world. So it is just, it's an assistant. It's a helper. It's augmenting your it's helping you make decisions a little bit faster.
Yeah. No, that's exactly, augment, I think, is the perfect word, right? Like it upskills you much faster. It augments how much productivity you are able to generate as a person.
100%.
Right. And so that's no, I think that's, again, wrapping this up to the whole knowledge base thing, right?
Yeah.
Like that has to happen for the energy industry to be able to keep going forward, in my opinion, especially if we have another boom cycle. Like I'm right there with you. Like I truly do believe that this is a like urgent matter that no one is paying any attention to. And all it's going to take is one more boom cycle when prices jump and there's no one there to hire.
Yes.
For us to and then so then everyone's mad because oil prices are high. And it's like, well, oil prices are high because you made everyone hate oil and gas. So no one went to school for oil and gas anymore.
That's right. And it's not cheap to hire.
No.
Go try to hire a petroleum engineer master's degree.
I was going to say experienced one.
They're making more money than data scientists.
Yeah. I believe it.
All right.
It's a rarer person these days, which is kind of crazy. Doctor, I really appreciate it. This has been really fun. We're definitely going to have you back.
I'll be back one day.
We'll have you back. We're getting ready to, I'll announce it here, but we're getting ready to start doing some panels and stuff on specific topics, roundtable discussions, and having those on Collide and stuff. So
talk to you guys. I love your place here.
We appreciate
some good drinks. Next time
we'll have a drink next time. I like it. Well, and on that, guys, where can people find you if they want to reach out or get in touch with you?
I am on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn,
Hatem Nasr, Hatem. Last name is Nasr. I think you guys may have misspelled it. You put Naser.
Okay.
So I am on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. I will, my email. Somebody wants to reach out is my first name initial Nasr Nasr at Softserve. Inc.com. Softserve, like the ice cream.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Guys, thanks for your time. Tune in next week. Make sure you give us a like or throw us a comment. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.